Mijn naam is Naomi Koster, ik ben secretaris van het Nederlands Auschwitz Comité en ik heet u hartelijk welkom bij deze 11e Nooit Meer Auschwitz Lezing. Vandaag op 23 januari 2014, 4 dagen na, 69 jaar na de bevrijding van het concentratie- en vernietigingskamp Auschwitz. U zit inmiddels en ik zou u wel willen vragen om alle mobiele telefoons in ieder geval op stil te zetten. Het programma van vanmiddag bestaat uit de volgende onderdelen. We beginnen met een film over het leven en werk van de heer Ocampo. Deze film is gemaakt door Lotte Katé en Martine van de Heuvel van het NIOD. Aansluitend zal mevrouw Nancy Adler, hoofd Holocaust en Genocidestudies van het NIOD, de laudatio uitspreken. En hierna volgt de Nooit Meer Auschwitz Lezing door de heer Ocampo. Vervolgens ontvangt de heer Ocampo de Annetje Vels Kupferschmidt-onderscheiding. Annetje Vels overleefde Auschwitz en was in 1956 een van de oprichters van het Auschwitz Comité, waar zij 20 jaar lang voorzitter van is geweest. Ze overleed in 2001 op 87-jarige leeftijd. De onderscheiding die haar naam draagt is ontworpen door de kunstenaar Jan Wolkers en stelt een zandloper voor. Het zand loopt niet door en symboliseert daarmee dat de tijd in Auschwitz toen stilstond. Na de lezing gaan we over tot het informele deel van het programma en bieden we u graag een hapje en een drankje aan. Maar voordat we beginnen met het programma geef ik eerst het woord aan de voorzitter van het Nederlands Auschwitz Comité, Jacques Gishaver.
Het is al gezegd, maar ik herhaal nog een keer. Goedemiddag, dames en heren. Namens de organiserende instellingen, het Nederlands Auschwitz Comité, het NIOD Instituut voor Oorlogs, Holocaust en Genocidestudies en de Sociale Verzekeringsbank heet u allen welkom van harte en bij deze 11e Nooit Meer Auschwitz Lezing. Nou, even wat niet op papier staat, maar wat ik wel belangrijk vind. Is er nog een vertaling, Nancy, achter jou een vertaling voor de heer Ocampo, van wat ik aan het zeggen ben? Ja? Oké, zo. Kan niet meelezen. Goed? Oké. A special welcome to Mr. Luis Moreno Ocampo. We are very honored to have you here with us this afternoon in Amsterdam and are most grateful that you accept our invitation to deliver the 11th Auschwitz Never Again lecture. A warm welcome also to your excellencies, ambassadors and high representatives van de country present here this afternoon. Nou moest ik verwelkomen eerste staatssecretaris Martin van Rijn, maar die werd naar Den Haag geroepen. En ook André van Es, de wethouder van Amsterdam, maar ook niet aanwezig, maar bij deze, als ze nog mocht binnenkomen. De Nooit Meer Auschwitz Lezing is een belangrijk onderdeel van de Holocaust Memorial Week. Een week waarin door het hele land diverse activiteiten plaatsvinden, die gecoördineerd worden door het NIOD. Elk jaar heeft de Holocaust Memorial Week een thema. Dit jaar is het thema overleven. 2 woorden, maar als je snel praat, klinkt het als overleven. En daar gaat het om. Overleven en overleven. Hoe leef en overleef je in deze tijd als je slachtoffer bent geweest van geweld, onderdrukking en vervolging? Hoe ga je daarmee om? Is er een antwoord? Ik weet het niet. Het is een complexe vraag, want oorlogs- en geweldtrauma's werken vaak een leven lang door. En het wordt de slachtoffers ook niet gemakkelijk gemaakt. Zij, maar ook wij, worden elke dag opnieuw geconfronteerd met wat zij hebben meegemaakt. Kijk naar het Midden-Oosten en Afrika, waar honderdduizenden mensen op de vlucht zijn voor oorlogsgeweld. Syrië, Sudan, Mali, Irak enzovoort. Kijk naar het religieuze extremisme in hetzelfde gebied. Christenen worden vervolgd en gemolesteerd door moslims. Soenieten en Sjiïten bevechten elkaar op leven en dood. Kijk ook dichter bij huis. In Europa zijn uitingen van antisemitisme aan de orde van de dag. Kijk naar Frankrijk, waar de Holocaust door een cabaretier belachelijk wordt gemaakt en waar in het openbaar een verkapte Hitlergroet wordt gebracht. Kijk naar de landen waar homoseksuelen worden vervolgd en zij, die zich hiertegen verzetten, in de gevangenis belanden. Kijk naar Hongarije, waar de rechtsextremistische Jobbik-partij een greep naar de macht doet en Joden en Sinti en Roma treiteren en mishandelen. En kijk naar grote delen van Europa, waar Sinti en Roma worden gediscrimineerd en uitgesloten van onderwijs, arbeid en medische verzorging. Soms leeft men weer in ghetto's met de muren omheen, zoals in Tsjechië. En het lijkt wel of we soms leven in 1935. En al dat geweld wordt veroorzaakt door gewetenloze dictators en politici met maar één doel: macht, macht, macht. Onze spreker vandaag, de heer Luis Moreno Ocampo, heeft een groot aantal van deze misdadigers, vooral uit Afrika, voor het Internationale Strafhof gebracht en berecht. En het is helaas nog niet genoeg. Een merendeel van deze misdadigers ontspringt nog steeds de dans. Dames en heren, ik wil u graag een stukje voorlezen uit mijn toespraak die ik hield bij de 5e Nooit Meer Auschwitz Lezing in 2008. En ik bracht dus naar voren toen: er zijn politici die de democratische waarden niet als hoogste goed hebben en hun retoriek misbruiken en inspelen op emoties van de kiezer zoals onzekerheid, angst en onvrede. Zij noemen dit waakzaamheid. Nederland dient vooral voor de Nederlanders te blijven. Dit is geen waakzaamheid, maar een regelrecht gevaar voor onze maatschappij en voor onze zo zwaar bevochten democratische waarden. Door deze inbreuk wordt de bijna spreekwoordelijke tolerantie van de Nederlander verandert onze samenleving langzaam. Ze lijkt te verstarren en te verharden en onze democratische normen en waarden schijnen geen betekenis meer te hebben. Nederland heeft zich in de loop der eeuwen een gastvrij land betoond waar velen een thuis hebben gevonden. Velen van ons, hier aanwezig, zouden hier nu niet zitten als dit niet zo was geweest. Einde van het stukje. En dit spreekt voor zich, dames en heren. De situatie is zorgelijker geworden sinds 2008. Het Nederlands Auschwitz Comité verzet zich tegen deze verharding in de samenleving met alle democratische middelen die het ter beschikking staat. Wij zullen blijven vechten tegen racisme, discriminatie en schendingen van de mensenrechten. In het begin van mijn speech noemde ik al dat door het hele land activiteiten in het kader van de Holocaust Memorial Week plaatsvinden. Activiteiten op diverse niveaus. In het voortgezet onderwijs, HAVO, VWO en op universiteiten. En dat is bemoedigend dat de Holocaust zelf na bijna 70 jaar zo in de belangstelling staat van onze jeugd. Dat geeft ons moed om door te gaan op de ingeslagen weg. Aanstaande zondag, 26 januari, vindt de nationale Holocaustherdenking plaats bij het Spiegelmonument Nooit Meer Auschwitz in het Wertheimpark in Amsterdam. En ik hoop, en ik denk wel bijna zeker, dat ik u allen daar weer zal kunnen begroeten. Dus dat is een afspraak. Ik wens u mede namens het NIOD en de Sociale Verzekeringsbank een goede en zinvolle middag. Dank u. Oh ja, nu moet ik de film aankondigen. De film kondig ik aan.
Mr. Moreno Ocampo, may I ask you to stand up? Pursuant to Article 45 of the Rome Statute, may I kindly ask you to approach the lectern in order to take the oath? May I ask you to raise your right hand and pledge your solemn undertaking?
Moi, Luis Moreno Ocampo, déclare solennellement que je remplirai mes devoirs et exercerai mes attributions de procureur de la Cour pénale internationale.
You may proceed to sign your declaration and take the seat allocated to you.
The problem is the biggest countries in the world are outside my jurisdiction. I have no jurisdiction on the biggest countries in the world because they never signed this treaty. And you can say in this sense there is a double standard. Can I change that? No, I cannot. For me, we have 116 countries where we should apply the law. That's why the ICC is a miracle.
Your Honors, the prosecution will present evidence proving beyond any reasonable doubt that Tomás Lubanga Dilo committed crimes under the Rome Statute. He committed some of the most serious crimes of concern for the international community. Crimes against children. The evidence will prove that Tomás Lubanga systematically recruited children under the age of 15 as soldiers to kill, pillage, and rape. They cannot forget what they saw, what they did. Girl soldiers were used as cooks and fighters. 1 minute they will carry a gun, the next minute the commanders will rape them. Mr. President, Your Honors, in this international criminal court, the girl soldiers will not be invisible.
When I was 32, I was thinking I never would have something bigger like a junta trial as a lawyer. That's the biggest case you have.
En representación de la comunidad argentina, vamos a solicitar el castigo que la ley prevé para quienes no supieron respetar la vida.
Nunca más.
I learned during the investigation how the junta organized. I learned a lot. Everything is well defined. Nothing is just a lucky situation. No. The generals, they justify themselves with the idea that they are protecting the group. And then what they do to protect their group is attack members of the other group. And that is the alibi. So I remember in Argentina, a discussion I had with the general. I told him, General, you cannot convince me that you were protecting freedom and democracy, torturing and killing people. And he explained, prosecutor, these are our values. They were the enemy.
Tell me.
Okay, sit. Sit there. We have a new version, okay? Mm-hmm. Read. That's the concept, no?
It's 3 big paragraphs of generality before we get to the child soldiers.
It's okay.
Yeah? Okay. Is there a way we can kind of merge the 3rd paragraph and the 4th paragraph? Kind of bring the idea together and make it a bit shorter?
No, let's do it this way.
Okay.
Florence, don't lose your calm, okay? These people coming from all over the world when we present the case of child soldiers. We appoint Ben coming as member of the team. He was at Neurenberg. Now he's presenting the first case of the International Criminal Court. Talk to Joanne about that, okay?
Hi. You okay?
Hi. I've read it, yes.
Yeah?
Much better than the last one, but not
Yes.
good enough.
Perfect. We'll work on it then.
Okay. Can you work this gadget?
Sure.
I dictate and you write?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. This is a historic moment. You can type?
Well, wait. I'm
Oh,
waiting for
okay.
the document to
Okay.
open.
Not on
I'm
yet.
sorry, these things don't work as fast as we people.
Okay.
Okay, here we are.
All right.
Tell me.
This is a historic moment in the evolution of international criminal law.
The case we present is a plea of humanity to law. We ask this court to affirm by international penal action man's right to live in peace and dignity, regardless of his race or creed.
This week is the end of the long process, 7 years, okay? And Lubanga is a big deal because it's the first case. To represent the victims of the worst crimes from all over the world is fantastic.
Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir. Mr. Lubanga can remain seated. Under Article 66 of the statute, the accused is presumed to be innocent until the prosecutor has proved his guilt. The prosecution submitted 368 items of evidence, the defence 992, and on the 20th of May 2011, the presentation of evidence formally closed. The Chamber spent a considerable period of time investigating a substantial number of individuals whose evidence was, at least in part, inaccurate or dishonest. The prosecution's negligence in failing to verify this material sufficiently led to significant expenditure on the part of the court. But the prosecution has proved, beyond reasonable doubt, that Thomas Lubanga Dailo is responsible as co-perpetrator for the charges of enlisting and conscripting children under the age of 15 years and using them to participate actively in hostilities, and in accordance with the majority decision, Mr. Lubanga is sentenced to a total period of 14 years imprisonment.
More than 8 years ago, I received an enormous responsibility to implement for the first time the Rome Statute. All the cases of the 26 individuals facing justice before the International Criminal Court have been against the top leaders, including 3 head of states. I thank state parties that they have given me the privilege to serve as the prosecutor.
Nancy, zou ik jou nu mogen uitnodigen op het podium te komen voor het uitspreken van de laudatio.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, honored guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. In 1984, at the age of 32, Luis Moreno Ocampo found himself face to face with the highest officials in his country, who had ruled Argentina from 1976 to 1982. They were sitting in the dock, and he was prosecuting them. At that time, as deputy prosecutor in the junta trials, he was tasked with exposing the massive human rights crimes of Argentinian generals and other top officials in the dirty war of the late 1970s and early 1980s. These trials were particularly significant because they were the first prosecutions of high-level commanders since Neurenberg. The defendants were accused of gross human rights abuses, including the disappearance of 30,000 people. Mr. Ocampo had to establish how the commanders approved and executed a meticulous plan to kidnap, torture, summarily execute, and cover up the crimes. It was a difficult, unpopular mandate, starting with the fact that initially Mr. Ocampo couldn't even convince his own mother that the authorities were in fact the criminals and the law enforcers were committing the crimes. She and many others like her perceived these officials as having protected them from the leftist guerrillas. The trials were extensive. In the course of these proceedings, 2,000 witnesses presented massive amounts of evidence to the judges on alleged crimes committed against 50,000 persons. Obviously, Mr. Ocampo's team could not rely on assistance in the investigation from the police force because it was so implicated in the crimes. So the victims themselves were called upon. Their courageous testimonies led to witnesses and documents proving abduction, torture, and killing. In the end, 9 senior commanders, including 3 former heads of state, had been prosecuted. 5 of them were convicted. Perhaps equally importantly, the trial educated the population about what had happened. A few weeks into the trial, Mr. Ocampo got a call from his mother telling him, "You were right, I was wrong." He had succeeded in convincing her and many fellow citizens that regardless of whatever affection they may have had for General Videla, he belonged in jail. The age of accountability was becoming a reality, and Luis Moreno Ocampo was at the forefront. He not only helped change perceptions among the population, which is a remarkable feat in itself, but he also sent the message that the use of violence and massive crimes to attain or retain political power could have grave consequences for those who commit them. His next cases involve the prosecution of lower-level commanders and chiefs of police, military rebellion cases, a military malpractice case against top army commanders, and numerous public corruption cases against high state appointees. Mr. Ocampo continued work in his own Buenos Aires firm, specializing in criminal law and international human rights until 2003. In the meantime, in 1998, the United Nations General Assembly convened in Rome to finalize and adopt a convention on the establishment of an international criminal court. Secretary General Kofi Annan lamented that many mistakenly thought the horrors of the Second World War could never happen again, and yet they had. Indeed, in Cambodia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Rwanda, in Darfur, genocide had become a word of our time. The International Criminal Court was the missing link in the legal system that would remedy the situation, whereby a person had a better chance at being tried and judged for killing one human being than for killing 100,000. It took more than half a century after Neurenberg for international criminal law to evolve to the point of establishing a permanent international criminal court. Its goal was to end impunity for the most serious international crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. A fundamental objective was to deter crimes before they take place by sending the signal to wrongdoers, whether they are heads of state, commanding officers, soldiers in the field, or militia recruits, that they will be called to accountability. This means that the ICC sometimes has the complex task of trying to advance transitional justice during ongoing conflicts in order to prevent future crimes. In principle, the ICC can only act if a country is unwilling or unable to investigate or prosecute, or if the case is referred to it by the UN Security Council. However, in line with one of the principles established at Nuremberg, that how a nation treats its own citizens is everybody's business, the prosecutor also has the so-called proprio motu powers to initiate his own investigation in situations that warrant it in state parties to the Rome Statute. For 2 decades, Luis Moreno Ocampo relentlessly called to accountability those most responsible for human rights violations. It is no wonder, then, that the 70-plus signatories of the Rome Treaty, which was the founding statute of the first permanent international criminal court, elected Mr. Ocampo unanimously as the first prosecutor in 2003. His experiences prepared him well for a position that had only just been created. During the junta trials, Mr. Ocampo could not rely on the police. Now, at the International Criminal Court, which is independent, he found himself in an equally precarious situation. He was a stateless prosecutor. He had the intricate task of negotiating support from the local authorities to help apprehend those indicted by the ICC. Imagine how delicate it is to approach states with such a mandate when the violence is state-sponsored and when the local authorities have aided the state in killing its own people. During his 9-year term in office, Luis Moreno Ocampo crossed the globe in his pursuit of high-level human rights violators. He examined 18 situations in 5 continents, started investigations in 7 countries, and requested arrest warrants or summons against 27 top leaders, including 3 heads of state. Among Mr. Ocampo's greatest challenges was a 2008 arrest warrant for the sitting head of state, Omar al-Bashir of Sudan. The charges were confirmed as crimes against humanity and war crimes. It took another year of producing evidence for Mr. Ocampo to convince the pretrial chamber to confirm the genocide charge as well, but he succeeded. Another remarkable moment came with the arrest of Laurent Gbagbo, former head of state of Côte d'Ivoire, for crimes against humanity during the post-election violence in 2010 and 2011. With no police force of his own to rely on, Mr. Ocampo managed to organize Gbagbo's transfer through the current head of state, Alassane Ouattara. Such negotiations, however, are not always so manageable. In 2007 and 2008, the world witnessed the brutal post-election violence and ensuing crisis in Kenya, which cost the lives of over 1,000 citizens, while hundreds of thousands of others were driven from their homes. For the first time ever, Mr. Ocampo had to exercise his proprio motu powers in order to get those responsible for instigating the violence to The Hague. During his investigation in Kenya, he personally spoke with many of the victims, received hundreds of residents of Nairobi at a town hall meeting, visited Matare, which is a particularly violent slum area, and did daily debriefing broadcasts of his findings with the journalists with whom he traveled. One of the victims Mr. Ocampo's team visited was Jane Wanjiro Wangari, whose house, along with all of her belongings, were burned to the ground during the violence. She now lives in a makeshift shack made of metal sheet. It is barren, but its walls are not empty. In that shack hangs a 2010 calendar depicting Luis Moreno Ocampo. Jane pinned her hopes on his fight against impunity. In his broadcast on the day after the visit to her, Mr. Ocampo said, quote, "I will do everything I can for victims like Jane. I will do everything I promise," unquote. At the end of 2011, Mr. Ocampo succeeded in getting indictments that summoned high-level political figures Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, in fact, today's president and vice president, to The Hague. After several unsuccessful attempts on the part of Kenya to halt the ICC's process, the trial of William Ruto commenced in September of last year, and the trial of Uhuru Kenyatta is scheduled to begin next month. Fatou Bensouda, Mr. Ocampo's worthy successor, leads the prosecution. While many cases started under Luis Moreno Ocampo are still in progress, at least one has concluded and made history. In the final moments of the first case against its first accused, the real and symbolic connections of Neurenberg to the ICC could not have been clearer. As we saw in the film, Mr. Ocampo invited the esteemed Benjamin Ferencz, former Nuremberg prosecutor, to deliver the last part of the closing statement. At age 92, the elder statesman of international criminal law reflected on the significance of the trial. He emphasized, as he had at Nuremberg, that, quote, "The case we present is a plea of humanity to law." Ferencz acknowledged that legal actions to enforce human rights declarations had been slow in coming, but he lauded this occasion as a historic moment in the evolution of international criminal law. Indeed it was. In March of 2012, Mr. Ocampo reached a milestone in international criminal justice with the verdict of Thomas Lubongo Diallo. After almost 1 year of deliberation, the judges found the Congolese warlord guilty of conscripting, enlisting, and using child soldiers under the age of 15 in hostilities in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Regarding the progress made by humanity, Benjamin Ferencz observed contentedly that, quote, "We don't kill the enemy, we just put them in jail." Thomas Lubongo Diallo was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. The man we honor today, Luis Moreno Ocampo, shepherded the first case against the ICC's first accused to its conclusion and has now passed the torch. While he has left his life as an ICC prosecutor, his experience will now benefit new generations of students, lawyers, human rights defenders, and it is hoped, victims. The message now to even potential wrongdoers is that we will not only see you in court, but we may see you in jail. It appears that the age of accountability has arrived, and thanks to Luis Moreno Ocampo's determined pursuit of justice, there is reason to hope it will stay. Mr. Moreno Ocampo, it is my privilege to invite you to take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this laudatio and for inviting me to be back in the Netherlands. I lived 9 years here. I had a house, as you saw the house in one of the movies, and I'm very glad to be back. Let me start. The only Dutch words you see are these Dutch words. Now, let me thank those who organized this meeting. And I like to thank them because I was reading about your work on the last years, and I was thinking, it's great. They invite, Annette Kupferschmidt was the driver of this idea,
And you invite incredibly interesting people, Oli Sachs, Louis Arbour, Thomas Burgenthal. I will present to you how these people were working with others like Raphael Lemkin, who invent the concept of genocide, Robert Jackson, who was the first prosecutor at Neurenberg, Eleanor Roosevelt, who introduced the idea of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Samantha Power, who wrote a book putting this together, Edith Wilseberg, who is just doing a movie about the Samantha book showing that, and I will use some of her shooting. I also like to present Benjamin Fenech, who was introduced previously by her. Fatou Bensouda, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, because basically this institution I was working with, this was not my work, I was a public servant, I was your public servant, working in the International Criminal Court. I was enjoying Christopher Browning's lecture here, showing how these atrocities are not about bad individuals. They are structural conditions. The idea that as my mother, and Nancy explained, my mother was thinking General Videla was a nice guy. He was defending her. So massive atrocities are not committed for wrong reasons. Massive atrocities are committed to protect my community. So it's about solidarity with my people against the enemy. That is the normal way. I will show Steven Pinker, professor from Harvard, who explained that violence is reduced. Jorge Semprún, who I like it because he was fighting in Spain, he was fighting in France, he was in jail, he kept fighting. And I like that you invite him to be here. And Simone Weil, who talked about education. The main idea for me is to show, you help me to understand that we are not alone. We are working together. Even we are in different times. Some of them were working 50 years ago, and they die. But we keep working with them. Or in different places, people in different countries working. And that is something you help me to understand. And my idea today is to present this in a way that we can discuss and understand, but also my goal would be if we can transform this, which I did these PowerPoints, in a more organized material to educate kids. You have a program on education, and I like if we can develop that, because we need to educate kids. That for me is the most important idea. And it's coming from Annette. Is Annette? Wait. This quote from Annette Fels Kupferschmidt. Racial discrimination will, in the end, always lead to a new Auschwitz. Only the law can save us from barbarism. I found this is a crucial idea, because Nancy was presenting my case in court. Yes, it is important, but it's not the most important thing. I would suggest it's almost marginal. The law is not for judges. In the Netherlands, you follow the rules. You have a very strict rules and you follow them. It's your tradition. You don't need judges prosecuting you for that. I always say in Berlin, you have this system that you go to the subway and there's no control. You can go take a train not paying. Everyone pay. Because it's the law and the people know they had to pay. It's funny. I have a Dutch lawyer working for me, and he was with a French officer working also for me at Brussels. And they had to take a subway to go for a meeting. And when they went down to the subway, the Dutch guy said, we cannot take the train. Why not? Because the ticket office is closed. Okay, we pay later, but go, take the train. But that is for me the idea of the law. The law is not for judges. The law is for people. And that is the challenge we have. That's why, for me, it's about education. It's not about trials. Because it's not how many people we put in jail. It's how many leaders follow the rules. That's the point. We cannot accept Syria, what's happening in Syria or Darfur. It's about leaders all over the world respecting some basic limits. That's what we are trying to do. And the funny thing is, we are still based in national states. Europe is developing this European Union community, but that's it. Imagine the Netherlands without prime minister, without parliament, without national police, and a prosecutor and judges. How will it work? And that is exactly the world. And there's an evolution, because, as Nancy said, 15 years ago, there was no international criminal court. So we are now using these cell phones. No? We have cell phones, internet, where everyone is communicated, but we're still institutionally divided. And that's a challenge in the world today. My generation studied about national law. The new generation will have to develop something new, how to live together. And that is, for me, the idea of how to discuss and give some foundations to the new generation to create new forms to coexist. So that is, for me, the idea, this beautiful, okay, Frank, we have a problem. No, it's working. So that's the main idea. We have to work on global education about the meaning of global law. In the same way, it's clear that we cannot go to the subway without paying the ticket. We have to be clear, no leader in the world can kill people to stay in power. And if someone is trying to do that, should be clear what a clear protocol, bound, is out. So the concept is all these people that you were inviting working together with thousands of teachers to create 500 billion of students, of high school students, to create 10 billion global citizens. That should be the goal in 10 years. So that is the goal. That's the real goal. Not prosecuting people. Making the law real for all the global citizens in the world. That's my idea. So I will try to go to some charts I prepared with some videos. Some of them are not working well. Just to explain to you how I see this evolution. And you should think how we can transform this into material for the schools, for your schools, in your neighborhood. Okay? Let me start with this guy, Herschel Greenspan. He was a member of the Jewish family, his parents born in Poland. So in 1938, the German government expelled 12,000 Jews born in Poland in one night. They allowed them to just take one suitcase and leave. And that's a part of the national sovereignty. This is a national law. Germans did it. And no one can say they have no authority. And these 12,000 Poland, with their suitcase, Jewish Poland, went back to Poland. And Poland said, we don't like you there. You are not allowing you to come in. So immigration reject them. So they back and forth between Germany and Poland in nowhere, under the rain, in the autumn of 1938. And Herschel was 17 years old, was a son of one of the families there. And his parents sent to him postcard asking for help. And he decided to do something really dramatic, to force the world, because he found no way to help his parents. So the only idea he had was to do something very dramatic to force the world to pay attention to this problem. And then he bought a pistol, 6 bullets, and went to the German embassy in Paris and requested to talk to a diplomat. And Ernest von Rath received him. And this guy, Herschel, shot Ernest 5 times. He killed him. It's interesting because Ernest was a German diplomat who was under investigation by the Gestapo because he was anti-Nazi. He was thinking the Nazis were wrong in prosecuting Jewish, but he was a victim of this young guy who was thinking that was the way to create massive attention. And in a very smart guy by the German Nazi guys, what happened was the following. The Kristallnacht. So this killing
produced the Kristallnacht. As you know, 1,000 synagogues were destroyed in Germany and Austria. 7,000 stores were affected. 30,000 people went to concentration camp. So the Nazis used the killing of the diplomat as a excuse to do this pogrom against Jewish people. Interestingly, look at the New York Times. Goebbels is responsible to stopping this. In fact, Goebbels was the one promoting this idea in a meeting with Hitler and the Nazi hierarchs. And Goebbels, according to the New York Times, was also being charged to halt this event. And that's showing the problem of national system when they abuse it. And that's the point I was trying to make. National legal system could be abused, and then what happened is Germany used its own national sovereignty to expel thousands of inhabitants without any possibility to object. There was no legal resource. They were fired. They were removed in one night. Poland was also using its own sovereignty to reject the immigration of those expelled. And the 17-year-old boy had no idea how to, they had no legal resources for him. So he used this dramatic and wrong, illegal measure to object what happened with his family. And for me, one of the most interesting things is Goebbels was in charge of both the riots and controlling the riots, because national system. And what some countries did, they removed the ambassadors for that. But do you know how much it affected the Nazi government? That? Zero. So there was no any efficient measure to control that. And that's exactly the idea that today we have at least some resources to do something different in this situation. That is the case we should present. This could be different this time. In addition to this national problem, Hitler was doing aggression crimes, invading other countries, as you know. And here again, you have no tool to control, so again, diplomatic activities. This is a picture of Chamberlain shaking hands with Hitler. As you know, when Chamberlain went back to his home, to his country, he said, "I saw the eyes of Hitler is a man you can trust." The issue is they feel they were not prepared to go to war with Hitler. That's why they did what they did. As a consequence, these are the peaks. These are the people who die in wars during the 20th century. As you see, there are two peaks. The problem is, we believe now we are in permanent peace. Are we? Or is it just a cycle that will be back? We don't know that. And the ICC is there to help, but will not be the only. That's why we need to build 10 billion citizens as a global citizens to avoid wars. And, okay, at the end of the war, something very unique happened. This, Neurenberg. Neurenberg has two incredibly important things. First, was the first time in the history of humanity that the prosecutor and the judges were representing humanity. They were not representing the Netherlands or a city. They were representing the world. So it was the first case where the world say, this is a crime, could not happen. And in addition to that, was the first case where a new crime was created called crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity means a widespread or systematic attack against civilian population. So it's a crime committed by a national sovereign state against its own citizen. In this sense, it's a huge evolution, because until Nuremberg, Goebbels could say, we do with our Jewish whatever we want. And in fact, They told them to the Americans, they say, we do with our Jewish whatever we want. In the same way, you do to your Negroes whatever you want. So Nuremberg was the beginning of a change of this absolute sovereignty, and a change on this idea a sovereign state could do whatever they want internally. That was the beginning, just the beginning. And a very important person at Nuremberg was this, I put in this long list, Robert Jackson. Robert Jackson was a justice in the US Supreme Court, and he was appointed to be the chief prosecutor of the first Nuremberg trial. Let me show you something he said, because it's so important today. Before Jackson was appointed, on April 1945, he made a speech about international law, and he said the following. You know, in the US, they don't like international law. And Jackson explained why it's important to establish the law in the world. He said, it ought to be clear by this time that personal freedom, at least of the kind and degree we have known in this country, is inconsistent with the necessities of total war and incompatible with a state of militarization in readiness for one. Think today in the allegation of tortures in Guantanamo. Think today about the possibility that your Dutch phones are spied by the US. No? So Robert Jackson was informing them, guys, we cannot just run the show ourselves in a war. We have to invent a global system. And he says something even better. Awareness of the effect of war on our fundamental law should bring home to our people the imperative and practical nature of our striving for a rule of law among the nations. So that was his vision. He was watching so clear. We need to establish the law among the nations in order to be safe in my country, in the US. And let me show him. Okay, Frank, this is the first. We'll see it's working. That was a big test.
The Chief Prosecutor for the United States of America.
The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated.
That's the point. It's not about idealism. It's about to be sure they are not repeated. And let me show something that he said to show Jackson was really thinking in the idea, the law for everyone. Because he also say in the same statement, let me be clear that while the law is first applied against German aggressors, the law includes, and it is to serve a useful purpose, it must condemn aggression by any other nations, including those who sit here now in judgment. So he was telling the Russians, the Americans, the French, everyone can be prosecuted. That was exactly his idea, not very common, but that was his vision. And that's because the vision was we're able to do away with domestic tyranny and violence and aggression by those in power against the right of their own people only when we make all men answerable to the law. That was the vision of Nuremberg. And what is happening here? let me present a group of people who tried to implement this vision. Ben Ferencz, Nancy presented him, he was 26 at Nuremberg. And in fact, he was a soldier in Patton Army. And when he graduated as a lawyer in Harvard and was enrolled. He was in Patton Army. And when the war ended, he was investigating the different concentration camps. And then went back to New York. And in a casual meeting, he met with someone coming to Nuremberg and offered him to be an investigator in Nuremberg. And he was just married. Ben convinced his wife that could be 6 months at Nuremberg, like a honeymoon. They spent 10 years in Germany, and they went back with 4 kids. The fact that, because when he was conducting the investigations, he started to found this Einsatzgruppe group, who basically was a group of killers, executing Jewish, gypsies, and anarchists. And as a good German people, they have everything documented. So when he started to find this information, he was collecting. And when he reached 1 million people who died, he went to see the chief prosecutor and say, look, we should do this case. Because as you know, after the first Nuremberg case, there were a series of American trials conducted at Nuremberg against different group of people, the lawyers, the doctors, and Ben was insisting we had to do this case against Einsatzgruppe group. And chief prosecutor said, we have no more budget, we have no more lawyers, can you do it? He was 26, he never did a case in his life. He said, of course I can do it. And he did the first case. That's why he's a short guy, you saw 26 at the end. And then you have Raphael Lemkin. I suppose you know him very well. He's a Jewish lawyer who lost his family, and then he developed this concept of genocide. I like to show him. And Samantha Power, who is the current US ambassador before the UN, she wrote A Problem from Hell, describing all these stories. And now Edith Belzberg, who produced this movie, Watch of the Sky, a documentary based on Samantha Power's book. And Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay, these are my partners in this game. Now, okay, this is not working well, but Nancy showed it. So, Frank, can you click? We have 2 problems with this. Is one, the sound is wrong.
I became the chief prosecutor for the United States in what was certainly the biggest murder trial in human history.
We ask this court to affirm by international penal action man's right to live in peace and dignity, regardless of his race or creed. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law.
Where did Group D operate? Groep D opereerde in de zuidelijke Oekraïne.
Okay. Here is a problem. Go to the next. In this show, I would like to show you these cases were trying to impose rules in the world. Can you click? And this.
Nobody had more than 22 seats in any Nuremberg trial. This was a small sampling of the highest ranking people that I could find and the best educated. It's a leadership crime. I didn't want to take the enlisted men who were just carrying out orders. These were all doctor degrees, double doctor degrees. We can't try everybody who's guilty of wrongdoing. All we can do is try to deter the crimes by pointing out how disgraceful it is.
And then Lemkin. Samantha's playing Lemkin now.
Lemkin was heartbroken after the war. He couldn't find members of his family. He knew his parents had been killed. And he decided, having come up with this new concept of genocide, that he would go to the place where law and the horror of what had just happened in the Second World War converged, and that was Nuremberg. Young lawyers, old lawyers, trying to figure out how to prosecute the most horrific crimes ever recorded, and he was going up to them and trying to buttonhole them in order to make genocide one of the crimes that they prosecuted in court.
Call Neo and say, I want to talk to you, I got to talk to you, you got to put in genocide, you got to put in genocide. That's got to be made a special crime. But we had a statute which said what crimes were within the jurisdiction of the court, and it didn't say a word about genocide. When I was drawing up the indictment, I charged them with crimes against humanity and war crimes. That was within the jurisdiction of the statute. But in my opening statement, I said what happened here was genocide.
The killing of defenseless civilians during a war may be a war crime, but the same killings are part of another crime, a graver one, if you will, genocide.
So that was the way that Benjamin Franklin adjusted to Raphael Lemkin's request to include genocide. As Ben explained, he could not do it because it was not created, the concept there. He started to establish, and that's why I put establish international norms through courts. But Lemkin, it is amazing because one guy, one individual, who lobbied the entire world to create the Convention of Genocide. Lemkin used to say, I define as my mission in life to pass a law between the nations to protect humanity. And then he said, I take the obstacles I have to fulfill my mission as a test of my moral strength. and you say, okay, Frank, can you we show now something that this guy did? Let me.
The first step that he took in order to see the crime prohibited was to try to get enough countries in the brand new United Nations to just pass a resolution saying that they deplored genocide, saying that it should never happen again, saying that this was a crime that shocked the conscience.
All men in the meeting, there are no women there, see that?
He got small countries to agree to co-sponsor that resolution.
So, Lemkin first was in Neurenberg trying to convince the lawyers to do it. Then we moved to UN, adopting this resolution. And finally, because Lemkin lobbying tirelessly diplomats from all over the world, on the 9th of December 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. I would say, sometimes we say we can do nothing. This guy had nothing, and he achieved that. And interesting, the next day, the General Assembly will adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Frank, can we go? This is Eleanor Roosevelt talking in a place that all the other delegates were men. She's the only woman in this.
We stand today at the threshold of a great event, both in the life of the United Nations and in the life of mankind. This Universal Declaration of Human Rights may well become the international Magna Carta of all men everywhere.
The Magna Carta of humanity, that is the idea she has in mind. The problem is, these ideas, this new Universal Declaration of Human Rights, have no real enforcement. Or nice ideas, but the enforcement mechanisms are in the national system. Frank, show them what the Minister of Justice of Hitler say about what is the law in the national system.
Do we mean the justice of Dr. Hans Frank, Nazi Minister of Justice, who said,
"The law is an instrument in the hands of the Führer for the realization of National Socialism. Anything which benefits our nation is just."
That's the concept of the Nazis. So, international law was adopted. It was creating human rights and trying to limit the sovereign state's power. The problem is, all this was stopped because of the Cold War. The Nuremberg trial was stopped because of the Cold War, because the Western countries needed Germany on their side against the communism. And that's why the Cold War freezing this. And then, however, even there were no institutional mechanism to implement the law, there were people using the declaration as Alvy Sachs. You know, Alvy Sachs is a Jewish, his father emigrated to South Africa, and his father was a Union Labor leader, and he became an anti-apartheid fighter. And it's very interesting, in his speech here, years ago, he said, at the beginning, I was hostile to a Bill of Rights, because for him, this should be a political debate, solving the political arena. But then he learned that some basic ideas, basic values, like including apartheid, should not be debated, should be adopted, and that's it. And that's why he said the UN Declaration of Human Rights became the norm for which we were fighting, and which we could imagine a free democratic South Africa in the middle of apartheid. So my point here is, the law, as you see here, no court for Alvy Sachs, but was a dream. And we need people like Alvy Sachs, and we need people like Raphael Lemkin moving the ball. That's why we need to educate kids. So I will make the long story short. End of the Cold War, we're back at Neurenberg. The Balkans were a disaster. In Europe, you saw in TV people in concentration camps that remind you the Nazi regime. And then Security Council, without a lot of thinking, created the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia. Basically, what the reason to create it was they were exasperated with the Serbs. Boutros Ghali, then UN Secretary General, say, the Serbs and the Balkan people welcome our effort to make agreements just to ignore whatever they sign. So, trying to find a different way to improve diplomacy, they created this tribunal for Yugoslavia. And the next year was the Rwanda genocide. Could not be ignored, a new tribunal. Then that created the opportunity, paved the way, to discuss, to go back to the idea of the International Criminal Court. The Genocide Convention, adopted in 1948, said that should be created an International Criminal Court. However, as I said before, the Cold War stopped that. This evolution recreated the moment, and it was a critical moment, a meeting on 15 June 1998 at Rome to discuss the creation of the International Criminal Court. Now is the most difficult challenge, Frank. We have to stop here and go to the video. We'll see if it's working. Because I have a beautiful video I cannot put in my PowerPoint showing, explaining what happened in Rome. Yes.
Rome 1998. More than 160 countries and more than 200 NGOs gathered with one goal in mind: to end impunity for the most serious crimes. Those assembled for the conference had an impossible task to try and solve 1,400 issues identified as disagreements. However, after 5 weeks of deliberations, on the 17th of July 1998, the day of the final debate, 1,400 issues boiled down to a crucial yes or no vote for states. 120 countries voted yes. Another 19 signed after the vote. The Rome Statute establishing the International Criminal Court was adopted on this day.
The gold diplomats clapping, they cannot believe it. And Netherlands was in the lead on this. Netherlands was in the lead on this situation.
By adopting the statute, states parties agreed that in order to prevent future crimes, they had a duty to put an end to the impunity of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. They committed to prosecute such crimes domestically and accepted the intervention of an independent, permanent international criminal court on their territory should they fail to act. By voting yes, they are resolved to guarantee lasting respect for and the enforcement of international justice. The International Criminal Court is the face of the system, but its strength lies in the commitment of states parties. With the new system came new challenges. More than 60 countries had to ratify the statute before it became operational. Senegal was the first in 1998, and just 4 years later, on July 1, 2002, this threshold was achieved. The statute entered into force, meaning the ICC can only investigate and prosecute crimes within its jurisdiction committed on or after this date. As the court started its operations, ratification kept growing. Today, more than 117 countries, seen here in dark blue, have ratified the statute. These include, amongst others, the whole of South America and Western Europe, most non-Arab Africa, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, Mongolia, Jordan, Afghanistan, and Georgia. The court has jurisdiction in the countries that have ratified the statute. However, the conflicts in Iraq, Lebanon, Zimbabwe, Israel, Sri Lanka, Burma, Nepal, Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, Bahrain, and Somalia are outside ICC jurisdiction. Therefore, the court cannot investigate or prosecute alleged crimes on their territories unless they accept the jurisdiction of the court or the cases referred by the UN Security Council, like they did with Darfur and Libya. Neither Sudan nor Libya is a states party of the Rome Statute, but they are members of the United Nations, and as such, they have to respect the Security Council's referral to the ICC in order to establish peace and security. The Office of the Prosecutor is currently investigating and prosecuting crimes within its jurisdiction in 7 situations: the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, the Darfur region of Sudan, Central African Republic, Kenya, Libya, and Ivory Coast. The office is also conducting preliminary examinations in 8 situations around the world: Colombia, Georgia, Palestine, South Korea, Nigeria, Honduras, Afghanistan, and Guinea. These are not investigations, but it is a process which determines whether or not the prosecutor will open an investigation in each of these situations.
Go back to the PowerPoint, Frank. So this type of material is material I suppose we can transform into material for education, to explain to the kids in a simple way what is this. So, on 17 July, the Rome Statute was adopted. On 1st of July, start operation. On April 2003, judges were appointed, and I was appointed at Nancy Show. And I don't need to show the Junta trial. Let me talk a little about US. Because the US is a country with universal values, but they think they should control how to implement the values inside the country. And Frank, can you show, I have a beautiful movie done for Neurenberg.
All scenes of Nazi activity in this film are from authentic German newsreel and official sources. All statements in English from German speeches are faithful translations.
I, Thomas Jefferson, have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man.
So, that's the position 2 centuries ago, and it's almost the current position today. Frank, can you show President Bush?
I made a decision not to join the International Criminal Court in The Hague,
which is where our troops can be brought in front of a judge, an unaccounted judge. I don't think we ought to join that. That was unpopular. And so what I'm telling you is that sometimes in this world you make unpopular decisions because you think they're right.
Okay, Frank. When I was offered this job, I was teaching at Harvard, and one of my colleagues told me, "Luis, it's a great honor, but you have to reject it." I said, "Why? I don't have to reject it." He said, "Because you will be 9 years at The Hague doing nothing and receiving a salary. It will be a shame for you. Because without your support, you cannot conduct investigations, you cannot arrest people." And in fact, it was very good for me because I said, okay, I cannot count on the Americans. I will show we can do it with the Dutch. And that's why now, can you show it? This is a closing argument of the first trial, and Nancy say, I invite Ben Ferencz to join me, because for me, ICC is Neurenberg permanent. Frank? Yes.
Ferencz is sworn in as an honorary prosecutor of the ICC.
They didn't give him much room for a signature here.
Mr. Ferencz, you're part of this office now. We are really honored to have you as well special counsel.
We use a swap.
Mr. Ferencz?
May it please your honors, this is a historic moment. I am now in my 92nd year, having spent a lifetime striving for a more humane world governed by the rule of law. I am honored to represent the prosecutor regarding the significance of this trial. In Rome, over 100 sovereign states decided that child recruitment were, and I'm quoting now from the statute, among the most serious crimes of concern for the international community as a whole. Vengeance begets vengeance. Seizing and training young people to hate and kill undermines the legal and moral firmament of human society. Let the voice and the verdict of this esteemed global court now speak for the awakened conscience of the world. Thank you.
Interestingly, the court was moving well in the cases in the blue countries. But when I was deciding how to deal with President Bush's hostility, I remember the day of my swearing-in, I was talking to my international relations advisor. I said, look, in order to reduce frictions, it would be great to start a case with the United Nations Security Council referral, that they refer the case to us, and then will be a way to start in agreement. She told me, Luis, you are ignorant in international relations. You have 9 years tenure, you will see no referral. Okay, forget it. She was right, I was wrong. But the world is changing so fast that what happened is, in March 2005, after four-month deliberations, the United Nations Security Council referred the Darfur situation to the International Criminal Court prosecutor. There were 11 positive votes, Russia, US, and China abstained. And showing how much things changed, then, in July 2008, I requested arrest warrant against President Bashir for the crime of genocide. And then, on December 10, 40 years after the Eleanor Roosevelt Universal Declaration, just 40 years later, President Bush, who was so against, became supportive. He holds a copy of a book written by a Darfur human rights activist, and Bush said, it is very important for President Bashir of Sudan to know that he cannot escape accountability. So, just it was 7 years after we started, the world was changing and adjusting. Why? Let me explain why Bashir in Darfur. Because Bashir used state apparatus to commit the genocide in Darfur. The most important on the ground people was Minister Harun. He was the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. Mr. Hussein was the guy in charge of the army and the security, Salah Ghosh intelligence, and Bashir used the rest of the diplomats to cover the crimes. For me, it's interesting because I see now the crimes committed by Sudan in the south of Sudan, in Kordofan and Blue Nile. And when you see the actors are the same. The only thing that changed was scenario. It's no more in Darfur. It's in Kordofan. But they're the same people. It's Harun, who is now the governor of South Kordofan, and it's Hussein, who removed Salagosh and now manage intelligence and the security forces. That's why doing efforts to stop Bashir is not just idealist. It's a life or death for these people. And that's the part that we are not learning how to do it. And that's the part we need people around the world understanding when this happens, we have to be united to say no. Let me show that, because this is amazing parallel with Hitler. Look, this is Bashir instructing Hussein, who is also, both are indicted for Darfur. Frank? Look what he said.
احنا ما عايزين اي حشرة ما عايزين اي حشرة في النيل الازرق ما عايزين اي حشرة في جبال النوبة عايزين ان شاء الله قبل بداية الخريف عبد الرحيم يدينا التمام انه ارض السودان خالية من اي حشرة سامة ان شاء الله.
Same guys with similar crimes in the south now. And now destabilizing South Sudan. And it's the same word that Hitler used, probably you know. Okay, now Frank here had to go to a minute, because, yes, go for it, and now move to a minute. Very good. I'm sorry, this is because we are not low technical abilities, but in the future.
Man kann nicht dem untreu werden, was einem ganzen Leben Inhalt, Sinn und Zweck gegeben hat.
If I, Adolf Hitler, can send the flower of the German nation into the hell of war without the smallest pity for spilling precious German blood, then surely I have the right to remove millions of an inferior race that breeds like vermin.
Is gone, Hitler, Bashir is still the president. Yesterday he met with Jimmy Carter, and he's promising reforms. Imagine Hitler meeting today with Jimmy Carter, promising reforms, while all the Jewish are in the camps. That will happen today. The court was still, so the court is working, it's creating consensus. Still, we need to build mechanisms to implement decision better. In February 2011, after just 2 days of deliberations, the United Nations Security Council referred the Libya situation to the ICC prosecutor. Everyone voted in favor, including US and China and India. So the ICC consensus is created, is established. The problem is still different standards in the world, and that's why in Syria, no one is talking about ICC, because the ICC cannot work, and the states are not promoting the idea to use justice to stop the crimes. And at the end, I think they will make a deal with Assad. So, to end the idea of ICC, go back to the map. The world is still that's why, if you are a Dutch guy, for you the law is making this country very organized. And you believe using the law outside will produce the same impact. Yes, but it's still, we are trying to change the world. That's why it's complicated. And then in the blue countries, we're working pretty well. In the white countries, where Security Council refer cases or not, that creates the perception, double standards, why Syria yes and why Syria not and Libya yes. That is something we should keep working. And that is a challenge for the next 10 years. When I took office, judges were thinking the court will close in 2 years. Or my colleague from Harvard saying, you will do nothing. All this is gone. But they are new. And I see back, we did a long way, but it's a long way ahead. And going back to the group of people you put together,
Just to end it with reality, Steven Pinker is a Harvard professor who's a psychologist. He wrote a beautiful book, and his conclusion is, believe it or not, and I know most people do not, violence has been in decline over a long stretch of time, and we may be living in the most peaceful time in our species' existence. Because, in fact, what happened is, until the 17th century, there was no idea of a permanent peace. Until the 17th century, peace was a time between war and war. In 1648, when Westphalia was agreed to end the 30 Years' War, the Westphalia is the first treaty which say it's a permanent peace. So the idea started there. It was not real because there were many wars after. But after Westphalia, all the new treaties were quoting, we want this permanent peace. And that's what we are trying to still fighting. For 3 centuries, we used diplomacy to make permanent peace. And as you saw in the 20th century, it did not work. Now, since the last 10 years, we have a new instrument, the idea to use the law to make peace. And that's an experiment we cannot fail. This is the book of Pinker, and Pinker say basically the state authority was critical to control violence in the national setting. In Netherlands, you escape all the persecutions and the Catholic persecution, and you escape all the problems when you build a state. And the idea is how to do it at the global level. We will not have a global state, but we can use global rules and the ICC to create a different framework. That is the concept that Pinker is promoting, and I agree with him. And to finish, I like to quote Simone Weil, because she, in her speech here, she invited the new generation to join in building a world in which there is no possibility for a new Auschwitz. And she said, this vision requires the education to ensure respect for every citizen as an individual and as a member of a community and a larger society. So she invited us to build global citizens. And so going back to our founder, Annette, racial discrimination will be, in the end, always lead to a new Auschwitz. Only the law can save us from barbarism. By the law, not just in the narrow sense to go to the court, the law used by our citizens, our global citizens. That's why I like to end with that. I think my idea and my offer to you is we can transform these materials into material for kids, for the teachers, help the teachers in the Netherlands to educate on this stuff. And after we can go to other countries, helping other teachers. But start here, using material and transforming and improving how the kids, your kids, are educated. Because I think that is the goal we have to achieve. All these people and you working together with thousands of teachers to educate 500 billion students, to educate 10 billion global citizens. Thank you very much for this invitation.
The time stood still. It's a sample, yeah. The sand will not flow.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dames en heren, hiermee is nu dan een eind gekomen aan het officiële gedeelte van deze middag. We nodigen u uit om onder het genot van een hapje en een drankje in de foyer nog wat na te praten. De tekst van de lezing van de heer Ocampo en zijn PowerPoint-presentatie en de tekst van de laudatio zullen over een aantal dagen te lezen zijn op de website van het Nederlands Auschwitz Comité. Een exemplaar van het laatste Auschwitz-bulletin en van het blad Aanspraak liggen voor u klaar op de balie bij de uitgang. Aanstaande zondag, Sjaak Grishaver zei het al, vindt dus in het Wertheimpark de Nationale Holocaust-herdenking plaats, georganiseerd door het Nederlands Auschwitz Comité. Een plattegrond van de indeling van het park ligt ook voor u klaar op de balie bij de uitgang. U bent vanaf 10 uur van harte welkom in de Boekmanzaal van het Stadhuis van Amsterdam. Hartelijk dank voor uw aanwezigheid en uw belangstelling. En we hopen dat we u volgend jaar weer in grote getalen zullen zien bij de 12e Nooit Meer Auschwitz Lezing. Dank u wel.